Realism is a fundamental line in international relations that emphasizes the anarchic natures of the international system in which governments prioritize their own survival and security. Realism, founded on a pragmatic knowledge of human nature and power relation, provides a premise through which to examine world politics as nations negotiate disputes and pursue their interests. Realism gives crucial insights into the reason driving state conduct, the value of military force, and the unavoidable competitions between states. The purpose of this study is to investigate realism's fundamental principles, historical roots, and relevance in contemporary international affairs. Realism as a formal theory in international relations emerged in the mid-20th century, particularly after World War II. However, its intellectual roots go back much further. Realism's foundational ideas can be traced to ancient times, gaining prominence during the Renaissance and the 19th century before being solidified as a systematic theory in the 20th century. It became especially influential as scholars sought to explain the recurring power struggles and conflicts in a world where atheistic approach had failed. In the 19th century, military theorists like Karl von Clausewitz laid the groundwork for modern realism. His book on war emphasized the strategic use of power and the idea that war is continuation of politics by others' means. This perspective highlighted the role of power and pragmatism in state behavior, a key tenet of realism. After World War II, thinkers like Hans Morgenthau and E. H. Carr formally established realism as a dominant theory. Morgenthau Politics Among Nations 1948 outlined 6 principles of realism, emphasizing the state's act in pursuit of power and national interests. Similarly, Carr's The 20 Years' Crisis 1939 critiqued utopian idealism, advocating a pragmatic approach to international politics. The philosophers and thinkers associated with realism significantly influenced its evolution. Thucydides in ancient Greece analyzed power struggles in his History of the Peloponnesian War, illustrating the timeless natures of conflict in the anarchic system. During the Renaissance, Niccolò Machiavelli, the prince, highlighted the importance of pragmatic and sometimes ruthless statecraft for survival. In the 7th century, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan introduced a state of nature, liberating an anarchic world where survival depends on power. Together, these thinkers established core realist idea, the anarchic natures of the international system, the central of power, and the inevitability of conflict driven by self-interest.
Realism is one of the foundational theories of international relations, offering a pragmatic and often sobering view of global politics. At its core, realism emphasizes power, national interest, and the inherent struggles between states in an anarchic international system. One key characteristic of realism is pessimism about international cooperation. Realists argue that alliances and treaties are often temporary, formed not out of trust but convenience. For example, during World War II, the Allies, countries like the United States, the Soviet Union, and Britain, united to defeat a common enemy. However, after the war, shifting interests quickly led to the Cold War, a period of intense rivalry between former allies. Realists contend that such partnerships dissolve when states see greater advantages elsewhere, proving their belief that international cooperation is fragile and based on shifting priorities.
Realism in international relations centers on national interests, where states prioritize their survival, security, and power. In an anarchic world without a central authority, states rely on their own military strength and strategic alliance to protect their sovereignty, often leading to power struggle as they compete or balance against trade. The primary goal is survival, with states taking action to safeguard their territory and resources. These often include building military power or forming alliances to counter rising their adversaries. Economic well-being is also crucial as states secure resources, control trade routes, and make economic deals to enhance their strength and stability. While realists recognize the promotion of ideologies like democracy or human rights, These are often seen as tools to advance strategy goals such as reducing conflict or boosting influence. States may push for these ideals to protect their own interests rather than from moral concern. Even in international cooperation, realists argue that states act to serve their own interests, whether through trade agreement, military alliance, or environmental policies. It is to increase power, secure resources, or enhance global influence. Ultimately, survival security and economic strength drive state behavior in competitive and self-help international systems.
Next is anarchy. Realists argue that there is no supreme authority to control state behavior and that the global system is fundamentally anarchic. As a result, each state must put its own security and survival first, usually concentrating on enhancing its military capabilities rather than depending entirely on international organization. Another characteristic realism in international relations is military strength and power in safeguarding and advancing a nation's interests. In a world without a central authority, where states cannot rely on any higher power for their survival, ensuring external security becomes a primary concern. A notable realist philosopher highlights that in this anarchic international system, today's ally could be tomorrow's adversary. Therefore, states tend to define their interests based on their power they possess or can acquire relative to other states, constantly seeking to maintain or improve their position in the global hierarchy.
Another defining concept in realism is the security dilemma. When one state takes steps to ensure its safety, such as increasing military power or forming alliances, it can inadvertently threaten other states. Consider the arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Both nations expanded their nuclear arsenals, not necessarily to attack, but to defend themselves. Yet, each side interpreted the other's actions as a threat, leading to heightened tensions and an endless cycle of escalation. Today, the security dilemma is visible in places like the South China Sea. As China expands its military presence to secure its borders, neighboring countries, including the United States, increase their military activities in the region. These actions, though defensive, are perceived as aggressive, fueling distrust and tension. Realism reminds us that in an international system without a central authority, states prioritize survival above all else. Trust is fleeting, alliances are temporary, and even well-intentioned actions can escalate into conflict.
Moral critique of realism focuses on the theory emphasis on power politics and state self-interest, arguing that it overlooks important ethical consideration and universal moral principles. In another word, moral critics of realism argue that the theories focus on power politics and state self-interest neglect ethical consideration and universal moral principles. Realism is often criticized for its perceived cynicism and a moral outlook as prioritize survival security and power over humanitarian concerns like human rights, justice, and ethical governance. Critique argues that by focusing primarily on state interests and the balance of the power, realism condones moral relativism, where actions are judged fully based on their effectiveness in achieving national goals rather than on their inherent morality. This could lead to justifying action like war, oppression, or human rights violation if they are seen as necessary for state survival or strategic advantages. Furthermore, moral critics contend that realism focuses on competition and conflict undermines the potential for cooperation and the pursuit of global justice. They argue that international relations should be guided by ethical principles such as fairness, respect for human dignity, and collective well-being, rather than being fully driven by self-interest and power struggle.
Realism in international relations faces significant criticism for its neglect of human rights in favor of state interest and power dynamic. At its core, realism prioritizes the survival, security, and strategic advantage of state, often placing ethical considerations such as human rights On the back burner, by focusing on the balance of power and state sovereignty, realism tends to overlook or justify human rights abuse if they align with the national interest or serve broader geopolitical goals. Critics argue that realism framework fosters an environment where the protection of human rights is secondary to the pursuits of state power. Realists contend that state, in their quest for security, are justified in making pragmatic decisions that may involve alliance with oppressive regimes or tolerating human rights violation if the choices contribute to the national survival or strategic advantage. For instance, realism might condone supporting authoritarian government or turning a blind eye to their human rights abuse, provided it aligned with the state security or economic interests. This position, critique argue, result in the normalizations of human suffering as real politic decisions are made at the expense of ethical considerations like justice and human dignity. Realism in international relations is often critiqued for its reliance on the human nature agreements, which assert that the inherent selfishness and aggressions of human drive to the behavior of state. This view holds that state, like individual, are primarily motivated by self-interest, power, and security concern. While realists argue that this perspective reflects an accurate portrayal of international politics, critics challenge the human nature argument for oversimplifying the complexity of human behavior and international relations. Critics contend that the human nature argument is a deterministic and pessimistic view of international relations that underestimate the potential for cooperation, empathy, and altruism among states. By focusing solely on the assumption that humans are naturally inclined towards conflict and competition, realism overlooks the possibility that human beings and state can in fact collaborate on the issue like peace, justice, and environmental protection. This view of human nature, critics argue, foster a cynical approach to global politics where cooperations and diplomacy are seen as futile or temporary solution to inevitable conflict. Furthermore, the human nature argument is criticized for its historical and cultural determinism as it tends to generalize human behavior across time and culture. Realism assumption that the same aggressive impulse that shaped the actions of state in the past will continue to dominate international relations in the future fails to account for the evolving nature of human society and global dynamic.
Despite Thucydides and the importance of power, according to Thucydides' view, he believed that politics involve more questions that leading to the principle of priority of self-interest over morality. Someone may absolutely determine what they want to achieve that will benefit them in a myriad of aspects, especially involving self-profit and career sustainability in politics. For example, in the international context, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a very ridiculous person that performed genocide to all civilians in Palestine nowadays for fulfilling his agenda of establish the greater Israel without ethical consideration that spanning the vast majority of the Middle East region. Therefore, this research will prove that Israel kept resisting the international order as stated in Article 14 of the international law about prohibition of genocide, since he wanted to secure his positions as a scenario prime minister. Even non-confident vote has been applied by Labour Party on early January 2024 after Van failed to take back Israel louder and failed to mechanize the states effectively and properly, even though they can be classified as the factor state. Yeah. Instead, anarchic state overview. According to Thucydides, he believed that political realist theory present an anarchic perspective where leaders act beyond egoism, using the state as a tool to advance their own interests. So, in such a system, Thucydides highlight a few essential key concepts like power, security, and anarchy, which form the foundations of realism concept in the international relations. A key example is we can see in the Million Dialogue where others argue that in the absence of a common authority, only a powerful state can survive. So this reflects a dynamics of the Peloponnesian War, where others sought to maintain its own hegemonic power. According to Thomas Hobbes, on the other hand, he viewed that the state of nature as a state of the perpetual war, where individuals act on their own desires, that leading to chaos and conflict. Without a central authority, Hobbes argued that life would be solitary, poor, nasty, and short. Yeah. So in our contemporary times, Vladimir Putin embodies his power-driven approach. So under his leadership, Russia has focused on enhancing military power, securing borders, and maintaining its global status. Like Putin's actions, such as the initiation of crimes and the ongoing conflict with Ukraine nowadays, it led to a desire to reclaim territory and assert dominance, particularly to oppositions to NATO's expansion. Like Thucydides and Hobbes predicted, since antiquity, policies prioritize national security and self-interest over international norms, because individuals can do whatever they wish, like as what stated by Niccolo Machiavelli, according to his realist view about the international relations.
Realism in international relations highlight the anarchic global system where states prioritize their survival and security, emphasizing national interests and military power. Realism explains that behavior and security dilemma. Despite its insight, realism faces criticism for neglecting ethical consideration, human rights, and the potentials for cooperation. While focusing on stability, it sometimes struggles to account for major change in the international system, making it a debate theory in contemporary global politics.